Hey everyone, Vincenzo Calla here, and welcome to episode 35 of Let's Discuss Politics. Today, I'm glad to be joined by the former Member of Parliament for Milton and the former Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, the Honourable Lisa Raitt. Thanks, Lisa, for joining me today.
It is a great pleasure. I love talking politics with you, Vincenzo.
Well, it's so great to have you here, and let's get this interview started. So, our first segment is called Lisa's Story, where we'll talk a bit about yourself and how you got here. So, first off, can you tell me a bit about yourself, your story, and how you got your start in politics?
You bet. I was raised in Cape Breton Island, which is, I think people know what Cape Breton is, but I was brought up in the working class part of Sydney, Nova Scotia, brought up by my grandparents, actually. And my grandfather was actually a union guy. And he was also what they called at the time an alderman in the city of Sydney. Now, he did that before I was born, I think. But I remember distinctly he decided when he was in his 60s, he wanted to go back into politics after retiring and ran for city council and lost. And I remember distinctly what the campaign was like. I probably was 9 years old, 10 years old at the time, but that was my first introduction into politics. And because he was labor focused, he was always talking about the importance of representing your people and fighting for your people. And I liked that. I thought that made a lot of sense. So all through my schooling, because he was my hero, I wanted to emulate him as best I could. I didn't get into party politics. I didn't get into partisan politics, but I ran for student council at all levels, in high school, in my undergrad, in my grad school, in my law school. I was involved in student politics, but student government side of it, not the partisan side of it. And, I was very fortunate I joke, Vincenzo, that I spent my 20s in school. So I did an undergrad in science. I did a master's in chemistry. I went to law school, and then I went over to England for a year, and I was able to practice there. And finally, when I came out of it, I got my first real full-time job at the Toronto Port Authority. And the Toronto Port Authority was very political in and of its own right. It was a pseudo crown corporation. It actually had just become a governmental business entity. Nobody quite knew what that meant. It was back in 1998, 99. And I was hired to try to make sense of it all. So I found myself in a lot of situations where I'd be bumping up public policy or politicians, lots of directors of boards who were politically motivated. And during that time, those 10 years, I had to skate. I had to be seen as pragmatic, and also being able to serve all masters, liberal or conservative. And that's kind of what I prided myself on. It got very political in about 2000, it'd be about 2003 to 2006. And it had to do with a specific project to build a bridge between downtown Toronto and the Island Airport. And David Miller was running for mayor at the time. And he ran on the promise that he would kill the bridge to the Island Airport. Well, he won. And he went to the Paul Martin government and asked for that, and they gave it to him. And as a result, I was quite upset, concerned. And I think that's when I started to think to myself, the real decisions in life are made by people in Ottawa. And that would be something I'd be interested in. So when an opportunity presented itself and the Conservatives recruited me in 2007, 2008, I consulted my family and decided I was going to run, and I did.
So, you talked a bit about how that was your work with the Toronto Airport Authority
Yeah.
was a little bit political, and I wonder how did that sort of bring you to eventually running? I know that you said the Conservative Party recruited you, but what made you decide to go forward into that and dive into elected politics back in 2008 when you ran and won?
Yeah. So I knew that my time was coming to an end at the port. It was about 10 years. I had known, look, I'd been watching Question Period for many, many years. I had been meeting with ministers. I had been meeting with ministers' assistants and their policy workers because of my role as CEO at the Toronto Port Authority. And I thought that I would like that life. And as a result, when I was approached, the thought process I went through was, okay, what do I do? And politics is about timing. You definitely, it's not easy to get elected. It's not easy to get a nomination. And I needed to ensure that no matter what decision I made, should I run and lose? Should I run and win? That it made sense for me for the next step in my career. So I did an analysis of it all and decided that running in and of itself was going to be a good thing for me for my career. And if I won, even better. And I was up against a guy who had crossed the floor. His name was Garth Turner. He went from being elected conservative in the riding to being a sitting liberal. And he was pretty popular. And I ended up being able to pull it off. So won by 7,000 votes and was immediately made a cabinet minister.
So you before I go on to talking about your work as a cabinet minister and as an elected MP for a number of years, um, you you lost in 2019, and after that you went on onto your current position, which is Vice Chair of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. How did
Yeah.
those skills that you acquired as a cabinet minister and as a member of parliament for 11 years, how did that bring into your current role as working for CIBC?
Well, let's start at the beginning. It is not an easy transition for people to leave politics and find a job afterwards, especially in your community. Losing isn't fun, especially if it's an acrimonious election, and especially if you've said some things that could be perceived as being negative towards the sitting government and the people that support it. And as a result, I was very, very much aware of the fact that I was going to have to be as positive as possible in my transition out of politics and into private sector. However, like I had a master's in chemistry, I have a law degree, I was a CEO for 10 years, so I had a lot of experience. And then, of course, time as minister. Um, when companies look at you, there are, especially I was 50. When companies look at you, they are looking for relevant experience, and there's nothing that can compare to being a cabinet minister. They just don't understand it in the private sector. They think it's all politics when a lot of it has to do with actual management. If you want to manage, I wanted to manage, so that's what I did. So I had to take a lot of coffees with a lot of people and just talk to them and figure out what my pitch would be. By the time I got to the meeting that was set up for me with CIBC by a good friend, he thought, okay, well, you have to go in there and make the case for why they should create this role for you, because it's not a role that currently existed or existed at the time at CIBC. And we went in and we talked about public policy and my understanding. And investment banking, what they appreciate is the ability to connect you with other people. So one of the skill that I had was, as a politician, you're very good at meeting people and interacting with them. And as minister, I got to know a lot of their businesses and a lot of their stories, and I understood an awful lot about how big systems of transportation, infrastructure, energy work in the country. And that was seen as a benefit to CIBC, that I knew people. What happened since, though, was the world's moving to decarbonization, and we had a massive shutdown from COVID. And in both of those cases, there are very important moves that governments have to make, and businesses don't understand them. So now I kind of sit in my role and interpret what's going on between the two and try to help companies understand and navigate what a process looks like within the federal government. And equally, I try to help government understand in their language what companies are saying, because there's nothing worse than any government, liberal or conservative, coming up with this beautiful policy idea and how they're going to implement it. And they put it out in the world and they think, yes, business is going to love this. And business goes, that makes no sense to us. That doesn't work. And I try to help. I try to help shape policy, but as well help our clients understand what's going on. So I've developed a niche, and it shows that it works because CIBC hired somebody else. They hired my former colleague, Navdeep Bains. So he has his space, and it's not the liberal space, by the way. He has a tech innovation space that he knows really, really well. I know, as I said, infrastructure, energy, labor, transportation really, really well. And we are there to show our clients that CIBC understands the issues that they're working within, can help where we can, give advice where we can, and not lobby. I don't lobby. That's not my role, but I certainly help. So I think I know that the guy who hired me is really happy he hired me, but he took a chance at the beginning.
Well, and definitely that chance paid off because it seems like it's a pretty important position now that you're
Yeah.
serving in and you're working in. Like you said, you developed a niche and you're working at it and you're doing well. And another former cabinet minister was hired too. So really interesting to see how that has grown and will continue to grow.
Yeah.
Our next segment now is called Serving as an Elected Official, where we'll talk a bit about your time as an elected MP in the Parliament of Canada in Ottawa. So first off, before going on to your work as a former cabinet minister, I wanted to ask you about your community and serving as a local MP. So what was your favorite part about serving Milton, Halton, in that area as their MP for 11 years?
You're always most proud of how much stuff you get for your community, right? The things that matter. So when I served Milton, and I still serve Milton, I sit on a local board, but we were, and we may still be, fastest growing community in Canada. Certainly we were in North America at the time, which needs infrastructure. So I was there to understand what the region and the town needed, and then make sure that when government programs came up, that I'd be able to communicate, and my office could communicate really clearly with the sitting minister as to what was needed and what was essential. So we built an art center, we built the velodrome, we built lots of hockey pads, we built soccer fields, we built wastewater, which is kind of important. We built roads, we built all kinds of little projects around town that matter to the local communities, but matter to a growing region as well. So those would be the things that I'm most proud of. And there's without your community, you're nothing. So that's the kind of stuff. I after I lost in 2019, I was embarrassed. I wasn't angry, but I was embarrassed that I lost. I felt I left people down. And it took me a while to go into grocery stores. And it was very heartening to be reminded when you went into grocery stores that just because people didn't vote for you didn't mean they still didn't like you. And I served my community. I didn't win in 19, but they still look back on what I did in a fond and favorable way. And that's about all you can do, right? That they have a positive feeling about you and all that you did when you worked there.
Well, definitely so important. And, the work that gets put into the local communities. I mean, a lot of that isn't shown nationally. I mean, as a sitting cabinet minister, you were on the national stage talking about national issues, but whether it's yourself or any other cabinet minister or any MP, that local work isn't shown outside of the community, but it's some of the most important work I'm sure that you do and that all your colleagues, former and present, have done and continue to do as elected officials.
Yeah.
So now on to Ottawa, this world of Ottawa. So you served as, remind me the positions, the ministries that you worked in.
Yeah. So I had Natural Resources Canada, number one.
Mhm.
Second one was labor. Third one was transport.
And then you were deputy leader of the
And then
Conservatives.
in
Yeah.
opposition, I
Yeah.
had finance, I
Mhm.
had justice, I did some work on workplace harassment, and I was deputy leader. I mean, at the end I became kind of like the jack of all trades. It's like wherever she was needed, she was put in to come in and help in whatever way I could.
Definitely, and lots of work there over 11 years as an elected official. So, what was your favorite achievement or a couple favorite achievements that you were able to do as both a cabinet minister? Well, we'll start off with cabinet minister first. What was your favorite achievement there?
So, velodrome in Milton, Ontario. It is it's a place where we're already producing Olympic champions, And it's just such an asset for the community. It's so unique. No one else has it. And it draws a lot of activity and a cycling culture in the area that was already there. So I'm proud of that. You would never know that I was involved. You would never know that the government put in 70% of the money for this. But that's okay. It's there, and I know I'm proud of it. And that was it. As a minister, in my portfolio, the work that we did around the Lac-Mégantic train derailment and subsequent deaths of 47 people, that to me was very life defining. It was the first time that as a minister, I was dealing face to face with people who had experienced severe loss, personal loss, but they also wanted to ensure that it didn't happen to another community. So my role was to help develop and communicate new railway safety regulations and rules, and then get the United States to buy into them as well. And we were successful. But I still can't believe we were able to do that. So in order for us to ban a particular vehicle or car in a railway, you need to have the United States to buy in, because they have far more than we do. And we wanted to make sure you need to have reciprocity across, because all of our companies are so intermingled. And they agreed, and they passed their laws as well. And we were able to make the announcement in Washington that we had done this together. And that was I know that those oil tank cars will never again be on the rails in Canada. And that to me was important. So that was an important one for me.
Well, yeah, and I remember I was still fairly young when that happened, but I remember hearing about that tragedy, and I was sort of, I don't know, I can't really say that I understood completely, but I remember it being something big and something destructive and something that needed work on it. And that work was important and continues to be important when looking at safety when it comes to trains and these sorts of vehicles that are being moved around everywhere.
Exactly.
We'll go on now to the last segment, which is called The World of Politics Around Us, where we'll talk a bit about this world of politics that surrounds us. So, first off, who is or who was another politician that has inspired you and did inspire you and continues to inspire you?
Okay, so who inspired me before? Jim Flaherty. Jim Flaherty, why he inspired me was supreme intellect, however, complete grasp of the importance of his community, and so down to earth and funny. Just a joy to be around, made everyone feel better, but great mind. And I idolized him. Even though I sat with him in cabinet, I idolized him. I thought he was amazing, and it was devastating to lose him. So young, right? Now I am actually it's not idolized, kind of weird because I work with her, but I have a lot of respect, and I like to emulate the career path of Anne McClellan. Anne McClellan was a Liberal cabinet minister. She left, she was defeated by my government in 06. So we never crossed paths. However, we're working together on something, a nonpartisan effort called a Coalition for a Better Future. And again, really smart, no BS, direct, centrist, just like Jim, a centrist. She's liberal, but we can find areas where we agree on things and can work together. And the attribute that she brings to the table is she's fearless, absolutely fearless. And I like that. In the second chapter of my life, I want to be more fearless in talking about the things that I think are really important, and standing up for what I believe is essential to my own party, to my own government, give that advice as fearlessly as possible. And so I have a lot of respect for Anne.
And finally, now I wanted to ask you, and we'll take a bit of time for this now, finally, which is what do you think is an issue that needs to be focused on more? And issue focused on by the current government, issue focused on by the Conservative Party as elections are going to come within the next years or so. What do you think should be focused on more?
It's an easy one for me, Vincenzo, and that has to do with the care of those afflicted with dementia and Alzheimer's in our country. My husband has young onset Alzheimer's. He was diagnosed in 2016. Andrew Scheer, I told right away when he was my leader. He didn't at all be concerned about whether or not I could be the deputy leader. He offered me the position. I thought I was going to be leaving politics, to be honest, and he made sure that I could work and stay within politics. And I have such a debt of gratitude for him for that, because I ended up staying 4 extra years in Ottawa that I wouldn't have had, but for an understanding leader who saw the value I could bring, even if I couldn't be in Ottawa every single day. So I'd like to see our party do more work in this area. I think Pierre Poilievre is doing a fantastic job of recognizing those who, because of their own circumstances, are not able to do as well in life as they'd like to, and is focusing on disabled, focusing on those who are marginalized. And I like that. And I'd like to see it expanded into those suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia. And one thing I've learned in the last 4 years, this is not going to get better. It's going to get worse as more people are afflicted. And we got some massive gaps, both provincially and federally. Provincially, it's about care because that's who's responsible for it. But federally, it is about the way the Income Tax Act treats people. It's the way in which we prioritize what we're doing with healthcare money. And that would be an area I'd like to see right on the front stage going forward. And I'll talk to any politician about it.
Well, definitely, and something that has been inspiring for many people who are going through this, whether they have loved ones that have early onset, like your husband, or whether they just have older parents or relatives that are going through this. They see your story, and a lot of people feel like they're not alone in the journey, whatever journey it may be. And anything that you want to say to people who may be starting to experience this or going through this as well now or in the future?
It is never too early to think about long-term care. And I know it's tough to think about not having your loved one at home, but especially with young onset, and I'm speaking about young onset, there is a point in time when their frustrations and their actions become a danger to the family. Either they are wanderers and they walk away, or they try to drive their car and that's a danger. Or in my case, they become violent with their frustrations and need medical treatment. So be prepared for the next step, and just understand what the disease does look like. One of the things that I from a policy point of view, that the federal government can help on is just a recognition of the policing side of it through the RCMP or through local polices in terms of interacting with those with dementia and Alzheimer's. I was really afraid to call 911 because I knew my husband would attack the police and I didn't want them to kill him. And luckily I got a sergeant who understood and had taken training with respect to dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's. So, there's lots of different areas. The last thing I would say is that in some cases, you just simply cannot provide 24/7 care. You can't patchwork it between what is provided to you from the province or what you can provide yourself in terms of if you can afford a few extra hours, or even yourself. Caregivers oftentimes, 10 years are taken off their lives as a result of what they go through, especially with Alzheimer's and younger loved ones. So thinking about long-term care as the natural and appropriate place for your loved one is something I'd like for people to consider. I know it's hard. I didn't want to do it, but it's much better for him, much better for him and everyone.
Thank you, Lisa, so much for joining me today. I'm glad we were able to have this great conversation, and thanks again for joining me.
My great pleasure.
Well, it was great having you. And if you liked this conversation, make sure to go check out the other conversation with Lisa on Instagram for top 10. So if you're watching this on the date of the release, it'll be coming out on Friday. So stay updated on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at VC Productions 25. Check out vincenzocalla.com, my website, and make sure to like, subscribe, and choose to get notifications here on YouTube. Let's Discuss Politics is a VCalla production. So until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla, signing out.